Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us here today as we kick off the 17th annual Cybersecurity Awareness Month with Cybersecuring U.S. Healthcare. We're so grateful for our partners at the Congressional Cybersecurity Caucus for partnering with us on this event. My name is Kelvin Coleman, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Before we get started, please know this event is being recorded, and there will be time for Q&A after our panel discussion. You can direct any questions to the Q&A box. You know, we have a great relationship with the Congressional Cybersecurity Caucus, and certainly co-chaired by Congressman Jim Langevin. He's been a great supporter of this issue and certainly the National Cybersecurity Alliance. He was scheduled to be with us here today, but due to technical difficulties, we could not have him on. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Bradford Wilkie, who's the Assistant Director for Stakeholder Engagement, Cybersecurity, and Infrastructure Security Agency. Bradford.
Hey, thanks, Kelvin. What a difference a year makes. Glad to be back with you all. I know we were due to hear from Congressman Langevin. I think we'll try to, look at that message and see where we can still get it out. I think it was a great placemat for what he had to say. I also know that what a difference a year makes, right? I mean, what a tough year we've been through. Last year when I talked to you, we were talking about the challenges of getting the attention of small business, local government, getting some energy really plussed into that. And I said, we're coming out with this thing as CISA called Cyber Essentials. Man, if that's not cyber fundamental and imperatives today, I don't know what, right? So, I think my basic introduction and kind of, level setting with you is it's gotten tougher, right? COVID, as a global pandemic has really taught us the necessity that this is a rising tides will raise all boats, but we really got to be in a collective community kind of attitude right now. We've got to make sure that if we can do everything possible to reach across, mentor, and invite in the small business, the local government, the citizen into this conversation, now is the time more than ever, right? So that's my number one upfront statement as your risk advisor. That's kind of the nom de plume we wear at CISA, is the nation's risk advisor, right? So, help me certainly, and I think we're willing to take partners and partnerships wherever we can find them. But I think as you look around, look left to the right, you see small businesses, you see congressional constituents, they are starving and well, I wouldn't say starving. They have that's a supply chain issue we're not going to cover today, but they have a real appetite to get to the table with you, to make a very concrete discussion, a partnership, look to you as mentors. We just finished our third day of our National Cybersecurity Summit. And Kelvin, you were great, man, wrapping up our day 2 stuff. That was awesome. What strikes me is what Tanya Yagurich said out of the FBI yesterday. She put on the funny nose and mask and kind of said sometimes she feels like an imposter. And while she was applying that to diversity and inclusiveness, I think what really rang true for me is that sometimes we don't think of ourselves as being in a knowledge position of power, right? Where we actually have a coaching and mentoring kind of responsibility or role we could wear. And I really think that's the challenge of the day. It's to make sure that, if you got partners to the left and right, small businesses, chambers of commerce, academia, right? Now is the time to form that coalition. Now is the time to find that collective defense. What else has changed in a year? My hair has looked more like the director of cybersecurity in the CISA agency, Chris Krebs. So I am not him. I am wearing that Bradford Wilkie name. That's mine to own. But I think the threats we're facing, digitally, physically, man-made. You look at COVID. COVID was an N-1 condition. We're already kind of reeling against. We've seen hurricanes, civil unrest. We see the elections disinformation. We see wildfires out west. We see, the challenges of moving supplies in this environment. And right now, I think healthcare is one of those. If we looked back a year, we would have said, hey, monetizing a protected health record is bad, right? Bad guys stealing our identities and using that kind of longitudinal profile that shows up as your digital health record. That's where they're making money. Ransomware probably was not it was in a peripheral window for us. Now we've got universal health service and the work there. We were thinking about the challenges of medical grade security for decades, and I think building assurance cases and taking some lessons from medical there. But we weren't thinking about those IoT challenges at the intersection of, medical insulin delivery and pump services and remote diagnostics, the type of thing that virtualization even makes even more of an imperative that we get right. So I can't wait to hear from this illustrious panel on some of the healthcare challenges, but I think also the solution space. As Kelvin said, welcome to the 17th year of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We call it NICSM. You can call it whatever you want. If you want to call it Cyber Month or you want to call it Challenge Month, that's great. But the idea here is to help all Americans, in all the areas of business, industry, nonprofit, really be safer and more secure online. What a great partnership we have with the National Cybersecurity Alliance and a lot of partners that we've been leveraging to really get out that last mile challenge. Local governments that are under stress because of decreased revenues, small businesses that have been shuttered on the front part of COVID. And, again, we're already sort of reeling from that. What better opportunity than we have in Cybersecurity Awareness Month to sort of pause, take an environmental scan and see who needs help. So if I leave you with any challenge, it's to help me with rolling out the gauntlet, throwing out the call to action that we really need to have collectively. And so my bottom line up front here would be, you sit in a position to influence the businesses, the constituents, the enterprises, large organizations in your congressional districts. Really, that's an opportunity to lay out to them that they do know something. They are not imposters in cybersecurity. They can actually teach something to those that are in disadvantaged communities, underserved communities, smaller business kind of communities. And I think there's a real opportunity. We're going to spend an incredible amount of time and effort and investment getting this month right as large enterprises. Open up that door. Make sure your programs, your training, your way of looking at awareness and the trends related is accessible to more than just your workforce, because quite frankly, we need everybody rowing together on this one. The theme this year, it's snackable, as our director likes to say, right? It's the schoolhouse rock kind of thing that gets left with you on the after school special. It's doing your part in being cyber smart, right? That's as easy as we want it to be, right? It means that as you take things into your home and that home area network environment, think about where you're plugging it in. Think about your responsibility to manage it as a technology manager, not just as a consumer. Think about these basic requirements of backing up data and patching systems and leveraging things like multi-factor authentication. Those things are going to take 99% of the bad guys' attack surface away from them. Doing your part also recognizes that we are really, really challenged under this workforce transformation that we see at play, and this digital transformation that is going to play out for decades to come. And that means that we're bringing in really the real internal devices, right, the corporate assets, and we're putting them at the farthest edge of our CISO's reach, right, of our security programs. And I think that's a real challenge in two respects. One is all this record keeping that was getting centralized is now showing up on, SharePoints and Teams events and these GoToMeeting kind of platforms. We're holding ourselves out here at the very edge of what is comfortable for generally centralized security operations. Number two, it's even more contested because you're dragging those governmental assets into a home area network environment. What have we been saying for a couple of years now? The bad guys are attacking your small office, home office appliance. They're attacking the way in which you do remote business because they thought that the critical few, 3% of us, were hanging out there with special information on the end of a VPN. Now it's 99% of us, right? So there's a bigger attack surface at play here. It's really time to do your part and your due diligence when it comes to the things you do in your home. Find a way to get that person who does know the tech side of things, let them tinker with your network a little bit, put the things that are IoT-ish in your smart TV and your toaster and your fridge off on one network and put yourself off and your corporate assets on another one. I think there are really clear ways in which we need you to do your part and get invested with. If you connect it, you need to protect it, right? You're going to see themes come out each week. Maybe Kelvin will go into some of the other ones here, but I think week 2 is really where I want to stop, and I'll let Kelvin pick up on weeks 3, 4. securing devices at home and at work, right? There is no difference right now in home or at work for generally 60 to 67% of the population. We're hanging out here doing work in the home area environment. That's where I'm beaming to you live, and all of my colleagues are pretty close to that environment as well. So if you think about it, you know, this home environment is your workplace. I know it's fun to put on, you know, I do have a, you know, coat and shirt on today, but I don't have the bunny slippers on, fortunately. But you know, that's the kind of environment we live in, right? There is seamlessness there. Well, I don't need the extra-ness, but there is a seamlessness here between the work and the home environment. And really that's putting a lot of pressure on us to do the right thing. I think somewhere in the middle is the role of the internet service provider and that last mile service provider for technology that we haven't really talked about very widely. So when we think about telework practices, it's not just using a secure technology like a VPN or a secure Citrix environment. It's not just about sort of doing the right thing for home. It's recognizing that the ISPs have a big role in raising their attention to you, getting your attention and saying, this is how your home area network is being challenged with viruses, with potential attacks, with denial of service. So I'm going to leave you with maybe some good news, which is as we look at last year's message, it's really just more of the same. It just becomes an imperative, not a fundamental. And I know that those sound the same thing, but foundational hygiene practices are really things that we got to get right this year. We've got to be really on our bringing our best game forward. So when it comes to small business, you know, we're doing a lot more to roll out cyber essentials with Kelvin's work with the Cyber Readiness Institute, with the Global Cyber Alliance, with NIST, with the FTC. We've got a coalition of products and services that really speak to different types of small businesses and the challenges they face, and giving them really practical day one types of opportunities to really improve their cyber hygiene, their due diligence, and some of their discipline. I think partnership is a large part of this. So again, I think the stressor isn't that CISA can be the phone a friend at every hour of the day. I think we want to be that, but I think local chambers of commerce, local universities, small business development centers, you know, your small business association footprint in your neighborhood, your city, right? Those are really near peers to you, and I really think you ought to be stitching together a local coalition and partnership. A little bit also on the positive side, you know, again, we've got great tips out there this year under this campaign. We've got 11 good tip sheets. They're gonna have you're gonna be able to read them in 2 to 3 minutes and pick up on those things like, what do I do to mitigate phishing schemes? What do I do to protect this home area network environment? What does it mean to be a good corporate or organizational worker out in telework land? And how can you partner better with your security program? The last thing we want to make end users or small businesses feel like is that they've got to pull themselves up exclusively by their own bootstraps and that they're in it alone, that they've got to resource every bit of this and hire expertise. They can partner to do it. I'm asking for your help in doing that. Finally, I want to turn to our great panel today. Folks I've known for a long time. Kat Megas out of the IoT shop at NIST, and we've been working together for about 2 years on just making sure that IoT is front of mind and frontal lobe for people, and that we don't mistake the challenges we have in enterprise IT environments with the rest of the emerging technology that's coming out. If we're going to have smart warehousing, logistics, smart industrial operations, and smart cities, we've got to start to look at non-traditional technology that has the same sort of challenge spaces in terms of cybersecurity. My friends Greg Garcia, Kelvin Coleman, Josh Corman, and Jane, right? We're going to be sort of stitching together this composite view of the challenges in healthcare and really talking about, I think, a lot of the work that we need to see proceed, not only for vaccines to get here on time, safely, and distributed on, you know, with not encumbered by our enemies, but really the other large challenges that healthcare is seeing at a time where there is no more fundamental Maslow's hierarchy of need, if you will, basic biological requirement than good healthcare along with, you know, food and shelter. And so I think we're going to hear about exactly that change in the sensitivity that we need to account for in the health services, public health systems, and exactly what we're doing about that in terms of countering phishing and data theft, as well as the cyber attacks that we need to be really well mitigated. So I'm going to leave you with the challenge space of getting the coalition built, getting it activated, and keep it going. This is Awareness Month, but quite frankly, there are 11 more months of the years where we're all challenged to do this well. Take these themes, pull them out in a lunch and learn kind of program, have a brown bag, take colleagues to lunch, go visit a small business, go visit their Chamber of Commerce, and really, really get involved. And I think there's some great potential legislation on the table for small business cybersecurity plus ups, for SLTT security. I think those are great things to happen, and we can't wait to implement them. So Kelvin, back to you, and I'm going to hang out for the rest of this great panel. Thanks so much, and turn it back to you, sir.
Bradford, we know how extraordinarily hectic your schedule is, so thank you so very much for joining us today. And to our audience, you can see why I'm so excited as the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance to partner with folks like Bradford, who I've known for quite some time. The knowledge, the passion, and certainly the willingness to partner is very exciting. And for those who are not familiar with the National Cybersecurity Alliance, we are the nation's leading nonprofit, public-private partnership promoter as it relates to cybersecurity and privacy awareness and education. We create and implement broad-reaching initiatives with our partners to keep folks safe at home, certainly to keep their families safe in their organizations and their systems and their sensitive data. Basically, our efforts focus on creating a culture of cybersecurity with everyone online. In addition to the huge monumental effort of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we have a few other core efforts as well. One which includes Data Privacy Day, which is held annually, annually on January 28th. We celebrate that with a number of partners from around the country. And this year we are going to have our Data Privacy Day program just as we have in the years past. Obviously virtual this year, but we look forward to getting you more information on that. One of our more popular programs, Cybersecure My Business, which is a program that's focused on small and medium-sized businesses to help them learn to be safer and more secure online. Certainly, we travel to local markets nationwide and lead a series of in-person webinars, highly interactive webinars, easy to understand workshops for small and business owners. Finally, the National Cybersecurity Alliance co-leads Stop, Think, Connect with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Certainly, Stop, Think, Connect is the global online safety education awareness program to help all digital citizens stay safer and more secure. Happy 17th Cybersecurity Awareness Month, everyone. And with that, we're going to move right along here and get into what I think is going to be a really exciting month. And as Bradford talked about earlier, we have now gone from National Cybersecurity Awareness Month to Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We think that's more inclusive, more open, and would allow more people to participate, particularly from around the world. Do your part. Be cyber smart is what our tagline is. Bradford talked about the first 2 weeks of the month. I'm going to talk about the third and fourth weeks of the month. The third week, we're going to be talking about securing healthcare, and that's what this panel is all about today. So I'm not going to steal too much thunder from the panel. We are going to go deep into that. Last week, what is the future of these connected devices? We know in 2015, we had about 15 billion connected devices. Today, about 20 billion connected devices. So about a 25% increase in the last 5 years. In the next 5 years, we're going to go to about 60 billion connected devices. It's a 300% jump in what folks are going to be able to have access to. How can we help folks to stay safe as they access these new and very exciting ways to connect? So the month is going to be jam-packed with some great things that we hope will be very relevant to our audience. And with that, we're going to kick off right now with this extraordinary panel. I think it's going to be very exciting to look at and talk to our panelists about securing healthcare. And so with that, I just want to start by each panelist introducing themselves. Greg, how about we start with you?
All right, thanks, Kelvin. Good to be with all of you, and happy National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, or NCSM. As Bradford said, I've been celebrating Awareness Month since the beginning, 2004, I think. We're at the 17th year. In many iterations, whether I was with the IT sector or the financial services sector, now with the healthcare sector, and sometime during my tenure with the Department of Homeland Security, sitting probably not too far from where Bradford would be sitting in an office if he were there. In fact, I remember it was in 2008, I believe, National Cybersecurity Awareness Month came in October, and I was asked by my PR people to sit in on a satellite media tour that is to be beamed into the local news stations all around the country, about 15 of them all around the country, to talk about cybersecurity. That was starting at about 5 in the morning, sitting in a dark studio alone. And I had about 90 seconds to 2 minutes of each segment while parents were getting their children ready for school to talk about cybersecurity. And one of the questions I got from the reporter was, so Mr. Garcia, dumb it down for us. What is cybersecurity? I think we've come a long way since then, even among the people who don't think about this every day. So, you know, I've watched it evolve over the years, and from a number of vantage points within various industry sectors and in government. I'm proud to be now the executive director of the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council and the Cybersecurity Working Group. This is a sector coordinating council of more than 300 organizations, including government, and we're all working Mach 4 with our hair on fire to do what we can to raise the bar across. And with my hair on fire, it's gone. So I've been working at this a long time. But collectively, what can we be doing in the healthcare sector as it becomes one of the biggest and juiciest targets for cyber adversaries? So I'm just glad to be here with a lot of great experts, particularly with Kelvin and Randy, who we were teammates at DHS back under the Bush administration, and it's just good to see all of you. So onward.
Great, thank you very much. And you can tell us the story of the guitars later on.
I'll serenade you.
Ms. Harper, please.
Well, thank you very much. And well said, Greg and Bradford. What a way to kick us off. So I want to start off by saying that the opinions that I express here are my personal and professional opinions and are not the opinions of Eli Lilly and Company. So that's my legal disclosure. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I'll keep this under 2 minutes. So my name is Jane Harper, and my title is Senior Director of Information Security, Risk Management, and Business Engagement for Eli Lilly and Company. But what I actually do is I lead a team of professionals that are focused on partnering with business and technology leaders to help them better understand how they perceive and they manage their information security issues and risks. One of the wins that we recently had that I'm really excited about has to do with our issue and risk tolerance efforts and our issue and risk management rating scales. The team's working on some additional great work around risk education. We're going to be hosting a series of lunch and learns titled Risk Management 101. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So from a career perspective, I started my career off as an operational risk professional within an enterprise risk management function. And through various transitions, I have held roles in information technology, internal audit, risk, and other security roles. And then over the course of my career, I just would be amiss if I didn't mention that I have had the pleasure of leading experts in the execution and development of information security programs, information technology programs, audit programs, internationally and domestically. And over that 20-year period, I've spent time in both healthcare and financial services. In healthcare, I focused my attention on supporting payer organizations, provider organizations, the PBMs, and now I am working in pharma. So I am really excited to be here, and I am looking forward to this discussion. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, I will give the National Cybersecurity Alliance a pat on the back so far with our panelists. Good Lord, you know, what experience, and we're going to continue that. Kat, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Kelvin. So yeah, I'm Kat Magnus. I work at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. For those that you don't know, we're the technical arm in the Department of Commerce. Much like the name implies, we do a lot of work in standards, but we also do a lot of work around research. We do a lot of work in cybersecurity and the applied cybersecurity space. I've been at NIST for about 9 years now. Prior to leading the IoT cybersecurity program, I was part of the NSTIC, the National Strategies for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, National Program Office. And before that, I was in private sector, and I've done a smattering of things from the very painful PeopleSoft implementations all the way through third-party CMMI certification for those of you that know. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I like to say a master of none, even though I think over the last couple of years, I've been trying to narrow that down as much as possible. So a little bit of background about the NIST IoT cybersecurity program. It's really an umbrella program. At NIST, we do a lot of work. We do a lot of work in crypto, and we're looking at things like lightweight crypto, which is something that's very integral to IoT devices and their cybersecurity, all the way through the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, or the NCCOE, where what we do is we look at kind of the applied cybersecurity space. We have a couple of projects there. We have one that is looking at wireless infusion pumps that was completed a while ago, where what we do is we bring in private sector partners working side by side with us in the NCCOE. We build out reference implementations addressing areas that we have heard from the community are of specific concern. So in this example, healthcare organizations said, hey, we know we have all these wireless infusion pumps deployed in our healthcare organizations. Help us ensure that we're actually securing those appropriately. And we brought in about 95% of the market for the wireless infusion pumps. We worked with healthcare organizations, we worked with security solution providers, and we published what we call implementation guides, which is a very lengthy part A. It's the part you want to give your CISO, your CEO, your business case, to your architecture, and all the way down to here is how the nuts and bolts are of how you deploy software and how you configure it. And then there's some work that I lead that's kind of our flagship work around providing guidance for both organizations that are using IoT devices, and I can talk about them a little later, as well as providing guidance now for manufacturers, understanding there's two parts to this equation. It's not just about the manufacturers and what they do, but they do need some guidance on what are the capabilities they should be looking at building. So thanks, Kelvin. Looking forward to the conversation.
Wow, thank you very much, Kat. And last but certainly not least, Joshua K, Captain America, I guess, there behind you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I have several hats, but I think what's germane here is I'm a founder of a group of helpful hackers called IamTheCavalry.org. We recently turned 7 years old. We focus on where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, cyber safety and cyber physical systems, and have tried to be an ambassador, a translator, a helping hand, a voice of reason to safety critical industries, federal government, and international community to try to catalyze outcomes. Our tagline was safer, sooner, together. The idea that eventually we'll figure this out, but if we pull together stakeholders and catalyze critical conversations, perhaps we can be left a boom and preserve the trust of the public as we're over dependent on these undependable things. Part of that work I did with the Food and Drug Administration and some fearless and courageous efforts from Dr. Suzanne Schwartz at FDA. We really ratcheted up a lot of the minimum cyber hygiene through pre-market and post-market guidance of medical devices. And that put me on a role with the, as part of the CISA's 2015 law, a cybersecurity task force for healthcare industry cybersecurity, where some pretty tireless work, which Greg has inherited a lot of the after action report through the Sector Coordinating Council. But we really tried to make sure that we weren't just looking at privacy or HIPAA 2.0, but rather, as we're increasingly depending on connected technology in providing healthcare, we really looked at the whole ecosystem for any of that dependence that could lead to adverse events or patient safety outcomes. And really the failure condition isn't even a single death, like perhaps we may discuss in Germany last week, but any sort of crisis in the confidence of the public to trust otherwise superior medical breakthroughs. Our dependence isn't going to slow, it's going to increase. And then more recently, I think Director Krebs this spring, in the midst of the crisis and the COVID, additional attack surface, additional adversary interest, asked me to lead my chief security officer role in industrial IoT to come into CISA full time. So I'm part of the CARES Act hires. I'm a senior advisor to Krebs on COVID, Project Taken, Operation Warp Speed, any of these healthcare challenges, including some recent incident response, trying to bring together the best and brightest of the private sector executive ranks, the hacker community, and build trust and collaboration in real time to rise to meet some of these challenges with the COVID pandemic.
Wow, I'm very proud of this panel. I think we're going to get a lot out of such expertise over the years. Let's just jump right into it. And by the way, just a reminder to our audience, please, you can submit questions in the Q&A chat box below. Greg, let me jump right into it. And Joshua mentioned it, just last month in Germany, we saw the first human death indirectly caused by a ransomware attack, in Germany. Can you set the stage for us here? And how is patient healthcare tied to cybersecurity overall?
Yeah, that was a tragic occurrence. And, we've been saying in the healthcare sector that we have found no reported connections between a cyber attack and a patient death. And this is the first one that we have seen now. And it is something that we have been feverishly working against over the past number of years, particularly in the Sector Coordinating Council. We realize, as Josh said, that the more that we are being connected, that technology becomes almost the circulatory system for our healthcare delivery system, that we are connecting patients to data and technology to patients and hospital systems and networks to the internet. The more that we do that, the more benefits we're going to see in terms of efficiencies and cost. But as we know in all other forms of technology and communications, that opens the door for more vulnerabilities and attacks. And it's, I would say, only in the past 8 to 10 years that we have really, in the healthcare sector, have been seeing a surge in attacks on the healthcare sector. And we started to really focus on this. There was a healthcare industry cybersecurity task force that was appointed by HHS. Josh served on that. Which was a task force appointed by HHS at the direction of the Congress. It was composed of a couple of dozen cybersecurity and healthcare experts in industry and government, and they were asked to assess the state of healthcare cybersecurity. And their conclusion in their report in June of 2017 was that healthcare cybersecurity is in critical condition. And for a number of reasons that they laid out in a series of solutions that they called imperatives, 6 major imperatives cascading, under which cascaded no fewer than 105 action items that they had a to-do list for the industry to get a grip on this very slippery and dangerous development in healthcare. And we recognized that the work was done for us there in terms of really making the assessment. So then it became, how do we implement this? How do we execute on these recommendations? And the Sector Coordinating Council, which for many of the viewers, I think you know what a Sector Coordinating Council. For those who don't, there are 16 critical industry sectors in this country, designated under the presidential executive order. The executive order sets up a public-private partnership, gives industry the primary responsibility as the owners and operators of these critical sectors to organize themselves around identifying those kinds of systemic threats and vulnerabilities affecting our ability to deliver assets and services to the public, and to figure out ways to mitigate them. So the Sector Coordinating Council works closely every day, every week with Department of Health and Human Services, with the Food and Drug Administration, with DHS, other federal agencies to try to develop some of these solutions to an ongoing, evolving problem in cybersecurity. So we simply operationalize those recommendations from the task force, established a number of task groups that were focused on some very specific deliverables that would address some of those recommendations, like we got to do better at medical device cybersecurity. The more that we're connecting medical devices to the human and to hospital networks, the more we are setting up a perfect storm for serious harm. We've got to do better at developing cybersecurity best practices for hospital systems, particularly the small and mid-sized one. And we know that the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month does a lot of focus on small to mid-sized organizations and consumers in the healthcare sector, like Lilly and many other of our member organizations. There's a much higher level of sophistication and awareness about cybersecurity, a lot more resources devoted to it. But it's those small and mid-sized organizations that we're really focused on, as Bradford Wilkie said at the beginning, a rising tide lifts all boats, and that's what we're trying to do in the healthcare sector. So, you know, medical device security, hospital best practices. We got to do better at information sharing. We've got to get more cybersecurity talent into the healthcare industry. We've got to do better at protecting our intellectual property from state-sponsored espionage of vaccine development. The list goes on. So we are really focused on making sure that we don't have any more deaths associated either with medical device vulnerabilities or with ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks were simply supposed to be easy money. It's simply put the mask over your face, encrypt the data. It's not with the pointing of a gun, but a mouse click that you're able to extract easy money from hospitals who need to get their data back. But then when it results in all of the data and all of the operations of the hospital being disabled, when a patient needs to be redirected to another hospital, that time between hospital 1 and hospital 2 could mean life or death. And in this tragic case, it meant death. So this is what we are working against. And I can tell you that we have made tremendous progress over the past 3 years. The Cybersecurity Working Group has produced now 11 or 12 sets of best practices by and for the healthcare sector. In some cases, we have government participation and even government co-leading some of these task groups. FDA and HHS in particular. The National Initiative for Cyber Education also has been leading our workforce development task group. So on our website, healthsectorcouncil.org/recommendations, you can view and download all of these best practices recommendations, which, by the way, are not unique to healthcare. They are available really for many businesses, but they are particularly written in the language that is understandable from a healthcare delivery perspective. So yeah, I'll stop there. We want to really emphasize that today, when you get a cyber virus and a human virus interconnecting, we have problems. So we need to be treating both of them with the same level of respect and diligence and resources, because now it's come to the point that, you know, hacking a computer is the same as hacking the human. So we have our work cut out for us. We're making a lot of progress.
Greg, it's absolutely incredible. I really look forward to coming back to you to follow up on a few questions, because extraordinarily interesting stuff. And certainly, Jane, I want to come to you right now. You know, buildings, you know, in our healthcare industry are more connected than ever. You know that better than anyone. For instance, many healthcare facilities have HVACs and fire alarm systems and elevators and many other connected things. Talk to us a little bit about the security risks there, and certainly where are the opportunities for industry to better manage all these connections across the enterprise's real estate?
Thanks, Kelvin. That is a very important question, especially when we are reminded that many healthcare organizations are considered critical infrastructure. And to add credence to your question, many of us may be aware that several years ago, a large retail organization suffered an incident due to an HVAC exploitation. I remember conducting an information security assessment for a healthcare organization and asking about the vending machine. And they said, well, you know, Jane, we consider those low risk because they leverage the cellular network. We did trust but verify, as good auditors and assessors do, and what we actually found is they were only partially correct. The vending machines did leverage a cellular network sometimes when they could get a signal. When they could not get a signal, the default was to fall back to the organization's wireless network. And what we found is because of where the vending machines were placed, sometimes it was very difficult for them to get that cellular connection. And so we pretty much found persistent connections to the organization's Wi-Fi network from these vending machines. Now you can just imagine the patching or non-patching associated with that. When you think about this question, Kelvin, it's a lot to unpack, so I'm going to try to keep it brief here and invite the other panelists to add thoughts as well. So when we talk about risk and opportunities, let's start with the blocking and tackling. Let's start talking about asset governance and management. I will say, as I have said over the course of my career for the last 20 years, it is impossible for you to secure devices that you don't know you have, you don't know where they are, you don't know where they came from, and you don't know who owns them. So I'm going to leave that there. There's a lot to unpack there. That's still an area within healthcare that, you know, we've got to come up to speed on. And then let's talk about connectivity risk. And when I talk about connectivity risk, I want you to think about it with three questions. What, who, and how? So what's connecting to your network? And then what on your network is connecting to the internet? And then what on your network is connecting to other things, devices on your network? And then who? Who's connecting to your network? And when healthcare organizations think about who's connecting to the network, they need to think beyond the box. It's not just about employees. From a provider perspective, you want guests and visitors to feel welcome. So you got to think about employees. You got to think about guests, visitors. If you're a payer organization, members who may be showing up to make payments to their health plan. We also have to think about third parties. Now that we've talked a little bit about the what's connecting and the who's connecting, let's talk about some of the hows. How are they connecting? Are you allowing persistent connections and you're not even aware of it? So again, connectivity risk, that what, the who, and the how. When I think about opportunities in this space, I think about a couple things. First, people, process, technology. From a people perspective, we need more talented information security and risk professionals to help us combat and manage this threat landscape. That's the first thing. Second, processes. Consistent, repeatable processes for how you onboard technology. Are you doing technology security assessments? Are you doing topology reviews? Do you have processes in place for onboarding these devices? And then when we think about technology from a technology perspective, are you leveraging the right tools to help do things like identify, protect, detect, respond, recover? Do you get alerts when some ad hoc or rogue device has been added to your network? And then are you leveraging those technologies in a manner that you're covering all the aspects of the OSI model? Are you covering the technology stack, including middleware? We have to be more proactive about these things from a people, process, and technology perspective. Very quickly, I'll move on to the next, what might seem to be controversial topic, and I don't intend it to be, but I want to talk a little bit about patch, vulnerability, and configuration management. So I want everybody to pause a little bit. Just pause for a second. I want you to think about all the devices that you have in your home. Now I want you to think about the number of devices that a mid to large size healthcare organization has. Let's sprinkle in a little complexity on top of that volume. Let's talk about the fact that they have different patching requirements, different configuration standards, and depending on the device, you may be restricted in your ability to patch. You mix all of that together, and I'm going to tell you what you have. You could have thousands of vulnerabilities sitting on the shelf. When we talk about risk in that space, I won't do people, process, and technology, but I am going to focus on people a little bit. Long gone should be the days that any individual business or technology leader makes the decision to patch or not patch, or to allow insecure configuration. We have to get better about integrating proper and robust risk management practices when we talk about patch, vulnerability management, and configuration management. This is key because we know that the one can affect the many. You can have one device that leads to the compromise of many devices. So we have to have real risk-based, truly risk-based, not just saying risk-based, because sometimes people say risk-based and I don't think they do the double click and really understand what that means, but risk-based approaches to how we do that. And as risk and security professionals, we have to be mindful that we are here to enable and protect the organizations. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we are on our game when we're talking about patching and vulnerability management and these configuration standards. We have to be innovative. We have to figure out how to leverage technology and really good process so that we don't drag the business down or, grind it to a halt. We have to be consistent. We can't have these firefighting all the time patch management exercises. What you do is you wear your business partners down, and they don't want to see you. They don't want to hear you come talk about patch management because it's a problem. It's work for them. So, there are a number of things that we can talk about when we talk about these devices, but those are the three that I'll focus on, and welcome the other panelists to add because I know there are many more.
Yeah, I really wish, you and both Greg would talk about this issue like you were passionate about it. Like you both have such passion. Really appreciate that. And we will follow up on that. I want to quickly, though, pivot to Josh. I mean, throughout this pandemic, every aspect, Josh, of the healthcare industry has been overwhelmed, including the cybersecurity efforts. What efforts are being made to support the healthcare industry's cybersecurity during this very difficult time, Josh?
Wow, it's a daunting situation. I'm really struck by some insights from the speakers thus far. I mean, Greg, what a great phrase. It's almost a perfect storm of a cyber pathogen and a physical one. It is daunting. It's kind of the nightmare scenario that we anticipated and were concerned about on that task force. And then we sometimes over-rotate on the thing most regulated, right? Most of the cybersecurity best practices in healthcare had been focused on patient health information and regulated data. I made a provocative joke on day one of our task force where I said, I love my privacy. I'd like to be alive to enjoy it. I think it was maybe a week or two after that first, to me, it was the clarion call and it rang the dinner bell for adversaries, but that accidental ransom compromise of Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, right at the first week or so of our task force, an accident, a single flaw and a single Java flaw and a single library and a single device took out patient care for a week, diverted ambulances to other facilities in LA traffic where time matters. Can you imagine being in that ambulance going to the next nearest hospital in LA traffic? So we were really grounded. And to Jane's point about unlikely systems, HVAC and elevators, for example, Greg and others have participated in something we did in between, which was called the CyberMed Security Summit, where we did live clinical hacking simulations, both in the ER and with stakeholders across the hospital, state, and local governments to simulate with tabletop exercises what would happen if we did a ransom of this facility. We knew that people would eventually flip to critical care, contingency planning, or mass casualty events, but boy, did the failures happen sooner than we expected and in novel ways. For example, locking up HVAC and elevators meant no surgeries because all the surgical floors were on upper floors. And in 116-degree heat of Arizona, no HVAC meant very, very hot buildings that needed to be evacuated. And while you could fail over to paper records for electronic health records, they stopped teaching their students about how to write them 6 years prior. So having paper that isn't discernible isn't necessarily actionable. So I think we had a lot of preparedness problems pre-pandemic, but now in the pandemic, how do we best help them, right? That's the question. You kind of have to dig a well before you're thirsty, and you take all the problems and resource constraints we had, and you add to it that it's not necessarily safe for your employees to go in the office, that you have to stand up new attack surface for rapid IT to do and enable telepresence and telework, that it may be too risky to apply patches. Maybe you have to constrain your budget and furlough critical staff that would have otherwise kept up with cyber hygiene. So I have significant empathy for healthcare professionals right now. And if you know someone working in cybersecurity and healthcare, send them a virtual hug, give them encouragement. It's a really rough job, and the best of times, it's an incredibly tough job during this extreme circumstances. So I think sometimes the best we can do is inform, influence, inspire. We've been trying to focus on reducing signal to noise ratio problems. And since I've got the CISA, there's been some good guidance on ransomware, some good trend analysis and bulletins on the most common techniques to attack both telework, but also specific to healthcare. If anyone's been following our CISA summits, on day one, just after my opening remarks with Director Krebs, Boyd and Roedner did go through quite a few pretty nice data visualizations for some of the insights we've seen on the most common attacks facing hospitals. If you haven't seen them, please study them, share them with your stakeholders, because they may focus your efforts, especially if you have fewer people, less time, and more risk with which to take action. We want those actions to be backed by truth, by fact, by focus. And as such, we're trying to make sure the signal to noise ratio is very good. A concern I have that's been emerging in the last couple months is the good news is we have seen more people sign up for our free taxpayer-funded cyber hygiene scanning of their perimeters, just so we can give you a daily readout on the known vulnerabilities that may expose you, your organization, and your patient care delivery. The bad news is we did see in several precincts a marked decline in diligence for patching. And patching itself isn't the whole cure. And while this is merely a perimeter scan, as we've now seen with Germany and potentially other places, these cybersecurity compromises can lead to cyber physical loss of life. And that's not something anyone wants right now. We already had to take a whole of nation approach to flatten the curve and not overwhelm these overtaxed points of care and health delivery frontline workers. Imagine having to do that with elective, avoidable denial of patient care from our electronic services. So while there's very, very good reasons why people may be patching less frequently, less quickly, the need is more important than it ever has been. And we want to cause and enable those hard risk management trade-off decisions with you and your executive staff. And we're going to be increasingly publishing things now in light of Germany and some of these new attacks in the US occurring in real time as we speak. So it's not going to be easy to do much more than you have. We've been struggling with resourcing. But what I do try to have people focus on is battlefield triage, right? How do we survive right now in the constraints? And where you may fail several times, you may have encountered many compromises and fall down. Can you quickly get up? And perhaps one of the best options here is one of the least sexy. It's backup, offline storage, and restoration. We've resisted, what if we break something by introducing segmentation and isolation in our networks? But perhaps it's, can we make sure that a compromise is of a wing or a floor, but maybe not the entire health delivery institution? So if there's some 80-20 battlefield triage opportunities to implement these, or even do a miniature version of our tabletop crisis simulations like we did at the CyberMed Summit, you want to, just like our kids do in school, you want to practice or fire drill before the fire rather than make your failures and rookie mistakes during the active emergency. So these may not be palatable, but they may be consumable and actionable. Maybe during the eye of the storm here before we have other hotspots or spikes in peak patient traffic. But it's really incredibly important that we patch at least the ones that CISA and the government put their weight behind. There have been some very exploitable and actively exploited vulnerabilities. And when we stick our head above the parapet, please pay attention, because we're trying to help you. Recent data science report I just read showed that the mean time to exploitation from the time a CVE is released is now compressing down to single-digit days, 3 or 4 days in some cases. So we can't relax or reduce our diligence on patching. And if you can't patch the device itself, perhaps you can shield it And if you're over dependent on something undependable, perhaps that dependence should be proportional to how reliable and dependable it is. And we need to make choices about which services can and should be connected.
Josh, I can really see why Director Krebs asked you to come over, man. Really appreciate that. You're always so thorough and knowledgeable on this issue. And I'm going to come back to you in a moment if we have time. The questions are pouring in, by the way, from the audience. So I look forward to getting that. But I'd love to talk to you a little bit about supply chain security. But before we do that, Kat, I can't wait to get to you to talk about IoT devices. We have now, thousands, right, in terms of devices in the marketplace, from fitness trackers to, implantable technologies. I have two questions for you. What is being done to test and secure these IoT devices? And the second question is, where do we need to improve? So, Kat, please.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of progress that is being made. I actually think out of all the verticals or industrial areas, I think industrial control systems and healthcare have probably been the two areas that have been thinking about connected devices and using connected devices more than anyone else. So I actually think healthcare, believe it or not, I think has a leg up compared to some other industries, I think, looking in this area. UL has been working for a while now. There's a combined project between UL and IEEE. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. They're looking at a standard for clinical Internet of Things devices. So there's a lot of progress being made once you have those underlying standards. UL already has conformity assessment programs around this. I know there's a lot of discussion. I've been encouraged listening to this panel because I'll be honest, when we started down the path at NIST looking at the IoT space, we started out by saying, hey, look, there's a lot of existing tools out there, and the Cybersecurity Framework is a flexible tool. It really allows an organization to say, okay, here's the areas that I want to prioritize that are the most important to me based on my business case. Because as you know, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So how do I start assessing where I am, prioritizing where I want to go, and kind of charting a path forward? So we created what's called NIST IR 8228. What it did is it looked at the cybersecurity framework and said, okay, once you know where you want to go, as you're using IoT devices, where are you going to find challenges? And at our first public workshop, there was overwhelming attendance from healthcare organizations, which kind of piqued my interest. And I said, well, they must be really, really interested in the risks around using IoT devices. And in the breakout sessions, we were really talking about, okay, tell us how you mitigate this risk. Tell us how you mitigate this risk. And in some cases, the consensus from many healthcare organizations was, we don't have a good way to actually mitigate those risks. Some of the controls we want to implement, we just can't, because the IoT devices just do not provide the functionality that we need in order to be able to do what we want to do. And that's when we started saying, okay, it's not just about the devices, but there is something we do need to tell the IoT or the connected device manufacturers, because without them building in some basic capabilities, organizations were just accepting the risk. And we asked healthcare organizations, why are you using those devices when you have no way to mitigate it and you know they're introducing risk? And they said that the efficiencies that they just afford us is just, it's just beyond what we can expect at this point. So we accept the risk because we just have to. And, more and more, that was already 3 years ago, those conversations. Now, the more I talk to organizations, they say, you can't even find devices on the market that are no longer connected. So there really is no choice to say, I'm just going to turn off connectivity on this device. Manufacturers often require those devices to be connected in order for the warranties to be valid. I agree, patching is one of the most critical areas. But when you think about, an operating theater, and you think about the complexity there, and then you think about virtualization, it's saying we are going to patch a device is often challenging for organizations. I supported the VA for a while, and honestly, many times they said, hey, people will die. And as an organization, I have to figure out how I'm going to make those trade-offs. So I don't cherish your role in risk management, Jane. I think that's an organization by organization has to make those decisions. What we're trying to do as NIST is we're trying to identify what we call a baseline what are some of the basic areas that any IoT device, regardless of market, should be able to support. And beyond that, it's really going to have to be a flexible framework. It will have to be a flexible risk management framework that will allow organizations to define for themselves what is it that they need. So I think there's a lot of progress being made. I do agree post-COVID. A lot of the things I'm hearing is, telehealth and telemedicine are kind of taking off, and we're seeing that being more and more of a critical need. But how do you start putting these devices into unmanaged networks? How do you secure those? We have a project in the NCCOE that's currently looking at that. On a side note, one of the takeaways has been really that using the cellular network for some of these telehealth devices is really more and more the way they're headed, because they're saying there's too much uncertainty when I try to introduce these devices into somebody's home network. So it was interesting listening to your story there, Jane. I think we're making an assumption about the cellular network, but there may be more to it than really meets the eye. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. At NIST, we try to say we try to define what needs to be done at the outcome level, and we really are trying to build something that's flexible, that will really allow organizations that are doing the implementing to figure out what's the right solution for them. Because when it comes to safety critical systems, if you're talking about smart grid, reliability may be the most important. If you are talking about, perhaps something in critical infrastructure, resilience may be one of your most important. It really depends on where you are in the marketplace as far as defining what are your needs.
Okay, first of all, we really enjoy our relationship with NIST. Thank you very much for being with us. But how fascinating that you're talking about, you can't even find devices out there that, cannot not be connected, right? And that is sort of it's a warranties, and it's just a fascinating piece that I had not thought of before. I really appreciate it. Listen, the questions really are pouring in, so let me just sneak one more in for myself here. Josh, let me come back to you for a second. I gave you a little warning about going to talk about supply chain security a little bit. What steps can the healthcare industry take to secure their supply chains, which are under constant attack, and how can public-private partnerships, something that's at the heart of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, how can those partnerships help this effort?
Yeah, this is I think supply chain risk is probably going to be a theme for this year. It sort of was unofficially last year, pre-pandemic. One of the areas often overlooked in supply chain risk analysis is the software supply chain, and one of our top recommendations I fought very hard for in the Cybersecurity Task Force report was the software bill of materials, the list of ingredients of all the third-party open source libraries used in approved medical devices and technologies. Congress liked it, asked FDA to do it. It's part of the pre-market guidance now for all FDA-approved medical devices. Software bill of materials was taken on by U.S. Commerce Department with NTIA, and we're in year 2 of that. The idea that was shared earlier of you cannot defend what you do not know you have, right? Asset inventory management, that includes even maybe the less obvious software supply chain libraries. When I take a lot of that practice that we did into now Operation Warp Speed, and you go back to real supply chain again, everyone's so hopeful and focused on the top vaccine and therapeutics innovators doing their research and development cycles, including our nation state adversaries and their espionage objectives. But they all depend on a very elaborate and robust ecosystem of downstream suppliers and their suppliers. And it's incredibly important to do supply chain risk analysis of the hardware, of the services, of the these less obvious weak links in the chain do not have world-class CISOs, risk management programs. They can't spell the NIST CSF, right? So we're using things like the Cybersecurity Framework to do battlefield triage to identify what's their current t-shirt size of security maturity posture. And some of this absolutely depends on open source intelligence and casting a wide net to avail ourselves of all willing allies, because it's not always clear to an organization who they depend upon. And we're trying to make sure that any weak link in the chain, from the delivery of the R&D of a vaccine through mass production, fill and finish, through storage, distribution, all the way into the application of our loved ones' arms to make sure that we can take the fight back to Mother Nature here. The problem with any supply chain is a break anywhere can affect the outcome everywhere. And so that means we have to bring great care and fit for purpose solutions to every link of that supply chain, as unobvious as they may be, and as under-resourced as they may be. So I'm hoping the future is that transparency is coming and the ability to do impact analysis of am I affected and where am I affected? And that's going to be a very different kind of emphasis.
I think we lost Josh.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, I could just add to where Josh was
there
going.
He is.
Oh, hey, there he is. I'll just jump in, Josh, and let you finish. I forgot what you said. It was failing in one place can fail everywhere. And one of the things we did with the Sector Council just last week, September 22nd, we published what's affectionately known as HICSCRIM, the Health Industry Cybersecurity Supply Chain Risk Management Guide, and it's actually based on the NIST Cybersecurity Framework on the supply chain core function of ensuring that your vendors, your suppliers are implementing the same kinds of cybersecurity hygiene that your company is, that your organization is. Not just the products that they sell you, not just the medical devices have security built in, but the services that they provide you, they are interconnecting with your network. And to be able to have a structured way for assessing the security of your third-party vendors and service providers is an extraordinarily important aspect to cybersecurity. You can do everything that you can do to secure your own network, but if you're not aware of what you're plugging into your network or who you're allowing into that network that's not part of it, then you are not completing the picture. So I would encourage everyone to look to that. It's posted on our website, just released last year. So third-party risk management is an important component to a good cybersecurity risk management hygiene.
Greg, thank you so very much for stepping in there for us with that great answer. I think we lost Joshua again. Either he needs to check his connection or somebody doesn't like what he's saying and cut him off. So we'll go with that. Hey, let's go into the questions. We have so many great questions here. Jane, I'm going to start with you. Let's go, because this question is specifically related to you, and they use your name in the question. So Jane's comment on vulnerability patching and the recent guidance set forth by the U.S. Treasury Department Office of Foreign Assets Control on facilitating ransom payment. How could this impact organizations who choose to pay versus patch? Is that fair, Jane? You want to take that one?
Absolutely. So in full disclosure, just really quickly, Greg, you are spot on about third-party risk management. There's a whole talk that I do where I talk about trust but verify, and I talk about third-party risk management and compare it to a marital relationship. Spot on. When we talk about ransomware, as a risk professional, I typically will highlight what I consider to be scenarios. If you pay, do you get the data back? And these are just some of the things you have to consider when you talk about to pay or not to pay. Do you get the data back? Do you get the data back intact? I'll share something that my brother shared with me a few years ago, and it was so profound, and I had never really thought about it. One of my brothers is a doctor, and he said to me, look, when I went to medical school, I learned how to give care. I learned how to save a life. I can do that absent of technology. I don't need a computer to do that. But in this new day and age where everything is automated and we depend on technology, giving me no information about the patient is better than giving me information that is inaccurate or has integrity issues about the patient. The data that we leverage in these systems help to drive our decisions, Jane, the same way that you use data to help manage risk. So when you think about to pay or not to pay, organizations have to have really candid discussions about, okay, if we pay and we get the data back, how do we have processes in place to do some type of integrity checking to make sure that the data is still intact, to make sure that we're not adding the risk of death to our patients because we have inaccurate or incomplete medical information about these patients.
Wow. Thank you very much, and really appreciate that. Another question here coming in. You know, Kat, maybe I would give throw this one to you and any of the panelists, by the way, you want to comment on this. I'm a registered nurse studying information security and privacy. What are your suggestions on the type of and where are the healthcare security jobs? Kat, I only throw that your way because I know NIST and we're working with NICE on some you know, cyber career efforts. So do you feel comfortable taking that one, Kat?
So there might be others on the call that might have a better idea of kind of where the jobs are. I have heard over the past couple of years a resounding, you know, input that we often get that some of the challenges in the clinical space is that the people deploying the technology are often not clinicians. So I can only imagine that somebody who has a clinical background who is now looking at information security is exactly the kind of people that we need to bridge this gap. You know, in fact, I've been really talking a lot lately about this role that I see emerging in organizations called the Chief Product Security Officer. And surprise, surprise, many times they don't live in the CISO organization. Many times they live in the Chief Marketing Officer's organization. And these are the people defining the features to build into products. So I can only see somebody with that skill set just being so much in demand right now. But there might be others on the panel that are better plugged into like where to direct them. So Josh is.
Josh, I see you eagerly wanting to get into this. So please, Josh.
Yeah, sorry for my all systems fail, including internet.
Nope.
I teach for Carnegie Mellon University's grad school program, the CISO certificate program, and I just added a new course this semester called The Rise of the Chief Product Security Officer. So it's not a brand new role, but it's an increasingly specialized role that really draws upon very different skills than a traditional CISO. It's more left of boom. It's more architecture, threat modeling, design resilience, the value of coordinated disclosure programs. So we talk about resilience a lot, but are we investing in the workforce and the executive leadership ranks to make that happen? The only way to get left the boom is to really start thinking strategically about these.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. Greg, specifically for you, they actually put your name in here. So let me, Greg mentioned some cyber healthcare best practices and a site to download recommendations. Can he repeat the name of that site as well as give us a little bit more information on that, Greg, if you don't mind?
Sure. It's the website is healthsectorcouncil.org. And you'll go to the recommendations tab, and there you will find the list of now 11 or 12 best practices guidance documents that have been published over the past 18 months. And as I said, the most recent one is the supply chain security risk management piece. I will say on the previous question on workforce, we also prepared a very light guidance on how to attract and retain and train cybersecurity talent into your healthcare enterprise, particularly for small to mid-sized hospitals. An interesting project that the Workforce Task Group is working on is the recognition that there is not yet in medical school or nursing school or pharmacy school any even fundamental cybersecurity training for when new clinicians graduate out of school and they start their first day on the job in the hospital or the clinic or the pharmacy. They ought to have some of the fundamental skills, understanding of cybersecurity. They're taught about HIPAA and privacy protections for patient data, but not really the understanding that they are on the front lines of so much technology. And if in the case of nurses or doctors, the technology meets patient. And what are their responsibilities? What are the basics that they should be doing? So we're looking at how can we integrate some curriculum into medical schools. Start simple, start with a walk and move to a run. But we're trying to inculcate that sort of basic cybersecurity awareness into the next generation of our healthcare providers.
You know, I probably need to mute myself as you all are talking, because when I hear you make these great points, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm like, that's right, You know, so that's still a country boy from Blair, South Carolina, growing up in Gethsemane Baptist Church coming out at me. So forgive me, but my God, what a great panel and such thorough answers, which is why I think one of the benefits of going this format, you can just really, you know, talk about these things. So to all the panelists. We have about 10 more minutes here before I turn over to my friend Randy Vickers. But any recommendations on how to get the clinical side to understand that cybersecurity is an enabler and not a roadblock? Jane, you talked about that a little bit, I think, when you in your comments. But for all of you, let's have all of you comment on this. Jane, you want to start? Any recommendations on how to get the clinical side to understand that cybersecurity is an enabler and not a roadblock?
That integration and being on our game, remembering that we are required to enable and protect. And from a risk management perspective, sharing the options, talking about solutions, and being innovative, thinking outside of the box. We know that at the end of the day, we have to be reminded that we are part of patient care. For too long, information security, information technology professionals have separated themselves from being associated with patient care, but we really are. Indirectly, we help doctors, nurses, clinical staff to provide services to these people. We have to own it. One of the things that I absolutely love when I worked for the system is we would round. So the information technology, information security, administrative staff, we would round with patients because we wanted our clinical staff to see that support, that integration, and that we understood and wanted to participate when we were talking about things like providing appropriate care. So I think that's part of it, being able to sit down together, talk the language, remember that we have a common goal in place, and start to not only, we talk about educating the clinicians. I agree, we need to educate them about cybersecurity, information technology, but we also need to educate our risk in technology and cyber professionals, right. Give them some type of understanding or about the work that our clinicians do and the direct impact on patients.
Thank you very much. And Greg, any recommendations?
I agree 100% with what Jane just said, and in fact, we had a in the cyber working group of the Sector Council, there was, you know, I think in response to the ransomware in Germany, there was a lot of discussion on this very point about trying to bring together sort of a mind meld between the clinician and the security person, and each side being able to speak each other's language a little bit more because they are dependent on each other for the security of their operations and their patient safety. And so we may very well take on some kind of a project like that to sort of bring those two together. I experience the same thing in the financial services sector. When you think of all of the technology that goes into trillions of dollars a day of transactions happening across the globe, including stock markets and treasury services and all of this. And many of the people who are running those core operations, technology-based operations, were not fully understanding how a cyber attack could affect a stock transaction, for example. And similarly, the security people within these financial institutions didn't always speak the language of the stock market technology people. And so actually bringing them together, just the way we want to do with security people and clinical people, if you get more mutual understanding about each other's responsibilities, and their pain points and how one depends upon and affects the other, then I think we're going to move that culture shift.
Wow. Kat, anything to add to that?
I'm lucky on mute, but I'm doing the same thing as you. I'm nodding as Greg and Jay. We're both talking because I agree with it all. I remember a project that I worked on a couple of years ago with a well-known hospital out on the West Coast, and they actually very early on they have multidisciplinary project teams, and early on in the team they have the data scientists working with the clinicians side by side, working with the information security specialists. And I think they actually, it was one of our lessons learned coming out of that project is they felt that really contributed to setting them up early. But it also started building this culture of, because it was a detail to this project team, and that would then feed back into the clinical team, would then feed back into as well as the cybersecurity professionals in the healthcare organization to start learning how to speak each other's language. So I absolutely agree with that being something critical is learning how to bridge that experience.
Wow, Joshua.
Yeah, empathy is the key to all of this, right? These are multi-stakeholder problems, and we early on rejected the notion that there's any bad actors. No one's the villain in their own story. Everyone's trying to do the right thing the right way. We all come from a different perspective. So when we engage stakeholders, we try to identify. You have to first be heard before you can hear others. So we try to get people to express what they want, need, and fear. The CyberMed Summit I referred to was really a multi-stakeholder experiential learning. What we found is we all use the same words, but they mean different things. So we had to harmonize our language. As such, one of the breakthroughs we had in I Am the Cavalry was we wrote a Hippocratic oath for connected medical devices, because patient delivery personnel like doctors and nurses, they already care about this. We don't have to give them something new to care about. It was putting this into language that was familiar to them. So we said, just like you take a symbolic oath, increasingly the technologies used to deliver care should also support and subordinate to your objectives. So we wrapped some really good cybersecurity primitives into language they understand. And we're not done yet, though, because as we work through this, Greg's participated in the last few CyberMed summits. We've been referring to the last mile problem. So we've had almost a double-digit number of safety recalls initiated by the Food and Drug Administration, and yet they've largely gone ignored by clinicians and physicians. And they have good reasons. They say, look, we're an evidence-based field, but there's not yet evidence of harm. And then we point out, well, this isn't really like a hip replacement socket where you look for a bell curve slowly over time and then decide when to do a recall. The infection rate is more like virology or epidemiology. And as we harmonize this, we're going to get through. But the way we're doing it is by talking more and listening more and doing these multidisciplinary experiences to see what assumptions we've been making and how to overcome them. I'll end here, but one of the huge breakthroughs was if we said cyber, they heard confidentiality of regulated data. If we said safety, it meant the device is working as intended. So a scalpel is safe if a surgeon uses it, but misuse doesn't count. And I said, all hacking is misuse, right? So we just truncated out all hacking. So we made a fake word of cyber safety just to make them say, what do you mean by cyber safety? And I think the goal is going to be talking more and listening more. But the goal is to get that mean time to enlightenment compressed before there's a lot of harm and a lot of lack of trust. You asked, how can we make them trust it more? I think we're already trusting it, maybe blindly. I think the answer is really, if we have that crisis of confidence, trust is going to, if innovation is the engine, trust is the fuel. And what we want to make sure is we can keep going faster and innovating because people trust these devices because they're trustworthy.
And an illustration of that, just very quickly, is, I mentioned at the beginning that we have a number of task groups, and one of them on medical device security. And the question of who's responsible for cybersecurity of medical devices has been one that's been somewhat in contention over the past number of years. Medical device manufacturers sell it to a hospital, the hospital installs it. As the product ages and patches become less available, et cetera, there becomes tension as to who is responsible for the security of that device. And so we decided we have to kind of deal with that. We have to deal with that subject. And by creating a task group that is actually co-chaired by a medical device manufacturer and by a health delivery organization. And in one case, it was co-chaired by FDA, and not in a regulatory role. You now have a leadership that wants to succeed at developing best practices for managing legacy devices. And the way you succeed is to compromise. And the way you compromise is, as Josh said, mutual understanding. You have to have to be heard before you can listen, and vice versa. So this is what's happening, and having that collaborative approach is actually working. And no more circular finger pointing, recognition that this is a shared challenge and therefore a shared responsibility. That patient safety requires cyber safety, and that's everybody's responsibility.
Wow. I'm very sad we're out of time. I've done many of these era. I got to be honest, and this is probably one of the first times I said, you really need to mute yourself, Kelvin, because you're probably distracting with all the agreement of the great points that are coming around. Really appreciate it. Greg, you were talking, because as soon as you started talking about that, I thought about Kat's comment about warranties, which I never really thought about. That's such a great thought to think that these things and the warranty that comes with them, and they may not work. It was such a great conversation. I may lean on everyone to redo this in the third week of our campaign, because that is our healthcare week. Jane, Kat, Joshua, Greg, thank you all so very much. This has been absolutely fantastic. And again, we may reconvene this, so stay tuned. So really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for moderating.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
you.
I apologize to the audience. We did not have time for Greg to do his song. Maybe we have in the third week. Maybe we'll have a Cybersecurity Awareness Month song he can dedicate to me. So
everybody is breathing a sigh of relief, Calvin.
And with that, I want to turn it over to a longtime friend of mine who just absolutely wonderful man, Randy Vickers, CISO, House of Representatives. Randy.
Well, I want to thank you, Kelvin. This has been a phenomenal experience. I can say I haven't had direct encounters with the medical community, but in some of the jobs I've held at the DoD CERT and US CERT, we've had
Randy.
From civilian capabilities into the DoD, and we were seeing devices that were having operating systems, network operating systems bolted on to X-ray machines and other devices, and still running Windows 95 and other things like that. And so we're going, how do you secure that? You need to upgrade that. Oh, we can't, because it will void warranty. Not an IoT issue, but a similar kind of thing. So I've seen this grow, but the days of bolting on security and bolting on operating systems to gain network connectivity are fading fast, and we're seeing more and more of the capabilities being built in. How does this relate to my role as a CISO at the House of Representatives? We work very closely with Dr. Monahan and his staff. And Dr. Monahan, for those that don't know, is the attending physician. He is responsible for taking care of congressmen and senators on a regular basis. He is basically their doctor. And so obviously the medical information that he has access to is, very critical, not only for the safety of and the healthcare of the members, but how that could be used in a very negative way. Forget HIPAA for a minute, but how could that be used in a negative way? So Doc Monahan is a huge fan of cybersecurity. It's a pleasure working with him, and we help protect that. But let's think a little bit about the IoT piece. We started working with the Inspector General's office here and coming up with ways to look at IoT. We are looking at IoT even as smart TVs. Everybody, those are the obvious things. But as we think about access to who has access to what, things that Jane said resonated heavily with me because we have people coming on campus to visit congressmen, to take tours of the Capitol that are now having attached devices. we're becoming more mobile. We're doing medical and other things on our mobile devices. That's connecting to either our house public Wi-Fi, or in some cases, if I'm sitting in front of a computer, onto our house network. So we have to be very understanding of what is connecting, when, how, and why. So IoT has become a new term for us. Cloud is the other thing, obviously, because we're doing a lot of things in the cloud, moving to the cloud, and how do we secure that? Because it does come to risk management. Cybersecurity is a term that's been thrown around for a while, but ultimately, what it really comes down to is how do we do risk management, and how do we support the business of the house, and how do we do business? Because if I'm blocking and tackling to a point where the business doesn't work, legislation doesn't happen, I don't have a job. But that would be a key issue. So an analogy I've heard numerous times, maybe by even some of the folks on this panel, is security is like brakes on a car. Brakes on a car aren't there to stop you. They're there to help you go faster and change direction. Okay, if all you could do is let the car idle so you could turn left or do something, then we'd never do it. We'd still be in horse buggy days. So obviously, as things grow and change, we have to look at things from a cyber perspective, from a risk management perspective. I have a complete team that does nothing but risk management and looking at how we allow for the business. And if we can go ahead and go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit in transition, because I know we're very limited on time, and it's great. And I wish, really wish we had more time for question and answers for this panel, because it's been inspiring. And I have to agree with Kelvin. I've had my hallelujah moments, especially, with some of the things Jane was saying, but the team here is great. I had the luxury, as Greg mentioned, when I was the director of the U.S. CERT, went from DoD CERT to U.S. CERT. Greg was one of the folks that hired me and brought me in, and we worked together. And then I've worked with Kelvin both through the Bush administration and the Obama administration as the director of U.S. CERT. And Kelvin and I, like you said, work together, and it's great that he's pushing these things forward. But for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we do have some opportunities internal to the House that you guys can join and participate in. We are going to have some virtual events as well. So if you have any questions, for those that can see it, it's kind of...
We lost your... Can't hear you, Randy.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I wasn't unmuted, sorry. But if you send an email to cybersecurity@mail.house.gov, we'll get you all the information you need to participate in some of our cyber activities we're going to have throughout the month. One of which is on the 8th, where I get to have an opportunity to spend some time with, you guys on the staff to ask questions about how offices should ensure that they protect themselves, not only within the office space, but as we've gone to this virtual environment, how do we do things better at home? And because we're doing a lot more with web conferencing, hearings, markups, those things are now being done virtually, hybrid, some in the hearing rooms as well as virtual. So there's a lot of great things. And, the medical community is a critical piece to the lives we lead. And since, people are doing banking, people are doing medical, people are doing work across the house network, it's always things that we have to be critical of. And IoT, like I stated earlier, is something that we're now starting to scratch the surface to better understand how we can ensure that the IoT devices that will be coming onto the campus, whether it's a Fitbit, a pacemaker, or some other capability, is able to do its normal business in a safe and secure way. We don't want to be the place where risk is introduced, because, another thing that Jane stated that resonates is, out of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, integrity is the most important. Every job I've had, that's been the number one worry that people have. What's the integrity of the data? What thing has changed from sender to recipient that could have a huge effect? Can you change a decimal place on a financial statement and change, something from millions to billions, or reduce it? What are the other things? But then confidentiality, we have to be considerate of privacy. With the 853 revision 5 is integrating privacy more into the controls, so risk management can look at privacy inherently, not as an add-on. It's part of that whole discussion that we have. And believe me, we have continual conversations with members about privacy because they have the concerns and I've seen questions of leadership. Can you help me? I'm in an accident in my district. I have a very remote district. Can you use my phone to help locate me? Well, the answer is, are you willing to turn on your location services on your phone? Well, if they're not, then the answer is we will have a greater challenge to help you do that. So privacy is something that is part of every conversation that we have as it relates to cybersecurity and risk management here at the house. So all those things are very important. Availability, I have to agree with Jane. If a doctor doesn't have, some computer sitting next to him, can he still take care of some information as long as he has the knowledge beforehand or some knowledge to help? Yes, so he can do, good medicine. But if he has data but doesn't have the right data, that could be a critical issue. So there are a lot of things that, we work with Doc Monahan to ensure that the data he has is, from an integrity perspective, is spot on. Obviously, the HIPAA requirements, we help make sure that he's able to secure that data and always make sure that data is available. We have put things in place so the right people can get to that information wherever the practitioner may be. So it is definitely a key asset that we consider. So with that, I will turn it back over to Kelvin. I want to thank you and the Cyber Caucus for allowing me to do another closing remarks. And it's great to work with National Cybersecurity Awareness, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I've done this for many years as well. Not as many as Greg and others, but definitely been around the Awareness Month program and the National Cybersecurity Alliance and others. Great program, great access to information. So I'm proud to be part of this group. So thank you, Kelvin.
Randy, there's never been a time where I listened to you, I wasn't highlighted or enlightened, on something. So thank you very much for. And I will not share the brakes example with my 17-year-old daughter who just started driving. Brakes are for stopping, and for her. So thank you very much, Randy. No, I really appreciate everyone being on today. It's been a phenomenal day, and again, we are seriously going to consider doing this again. The recording for the webinar will be available on our website in a few days, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you want to become a champion of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, please go to StaySafeOnline.org. Free resources that have been made available through our industry partners like Eli Lilly and others on our board, and certainly through Bradford and Chris Krebs and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, our agreement that we have with them to provide these things to people. So go to our website and you can become a champion for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. One of the best ways to stay up to date with the National Cybersecurity Alliance is, I think we have a slide with, there it is. Please go to our Twitter at StaySafeOnline.org. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as our email, info@StaySafeOnline.org. You can learn all about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, the National Cybersecurity Alliance, CISA, as well as our board member companies. Thank you so very much for joining us today, and happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month, everyone.